Welcome back to another one of Nathan Bell's commentary videos about philosophy, science, culture, politics, all sorts of topics. It's Sunday morning here in Newcastle, and today Nate wanted to talk to you about death.
Well, it's a pretty grim subject for Sunday morning, but I wanted to get it off my chest. For the last 5 years or so, I've been dealing with mortality from a very strong atheist perspective. I am open-minded in thinking that we might have a soul and that consciousness might continue after death, and I'm very interested in people who have near-death experiences and see tunnels of light and sort of proclaim that they interacted with Jesus or whatever after they died and then came back to life, and all that stuff. That New Age stuff interests me, and it's amazing. And I do think, that we could have a spirit and that we could have a soul, which is consciousness, and that it returns to the universe and the hive mind of the universe after we die. But putting all that aside, I'll talk about death from a materialist perspective, which is acknowledging that I will die and then there will be nothing left of me. I will cease to exist, and that my life is finite, and that eventually the whole universe will die and everything will cease to exist, and all memory of me and everything I ever thought will fade to oblivion, and all memory of the human species entirely will fade to oblivion, and all memory of every species that has ever lived in the universe will die and will fade to oblivion as if it never happened. And it will all be at the end of the universe, after the universe collapses in on itself. It will be as if none of this ever happened, and there will be no memory or knowledge of anything, as if it might as well have never happened. And it's like, one thing I used to make a habit of is I would visit old graveyards, and I would look at graves that were, like 150 years old, and I'd read the name on the grave, and I'd think, nobody knows this person anymore. It's like this person never existed. You go to a graveyard, person is buried there, and there's a tombstone, and you realise they died in like 1890 or something, and nobody knows about them. Nobody knows they ever existed. Their memory, all but this gravestone and any records that are kept, is lost to history. So I used to think it was very sad, the forgotten people. And you realise there's only a few generations detachment between people who died a century ago and now, and yet we don't know anything about these people, unless you take the time to go and study history and learn about the people who lived a century ago. It's interesting, future archaeologists will be able to piece together an entire map of our lives and our personalities, because from 30 years ago, we all have all of our information stored on the internet and social media. So future archaeologists will be able to see exactly who we were and study every aspect of our lives and know who we were in great detail. And as my support worker Ezekiel Lux always jokes about, they'll be able to run us through AI programs and create deep fakes of us that talk and act just like us, and have our personalities, but it will be a digital copy of what we were like. So it's interesting. But yeah, I've been dealing with death and mortality from a strictly materialist atheist perspective for about 5 years, because some things went wrong, and what I realised was it's all really just chance and random, and anything can happen. And what I started to think about more as and I'm always reading about people's lives, and you read about kids, they get to the 4 years old and they've got leukemia and they're dead before they're 5. So, I'm just forever grateful that I've even made it to an age where I've gained enough maturity and knowledge and wisdom about the world that I could contemplate the meaning of life and the universe, because some kids die before they're 4, and there are children dying in car accidents when they're babies. You ever heard about these cases where kids get left in the back of the car by their parent and then they die and they're 6 months old? Like, those people, they're the people we should really feel sad for. They never got anywhere. Children that die before they're 5 years old never got to live life, never got to experience anything. But that's the reality of life, and that's the materialist scientific perspective I'm currently looking at death from, acknowledging that death can come at any time, and so many people die in such tragic circumstances at a time where they never really got to live or do anything or think. Or, kids that are sick in school. It's sad. The younger you die, the sadder it is. So I'm just grateful that I've got to this point in my life where I've been able to have the realizations and the awareness that I have gained in my short life. So So, over the last few years, lots of people died around me. In the last building I lived in that building for 5 years, and while I was there, 2 people died randomly in their apartments, and the whole building stunk like death for like a week. It stunk like dying, because it took a while for these people to be found because they didn't have anyone. And then now in the building I live in now, last year a woman in her 30s died, and the whole building stunk like death again. It took a while for her to be found, so it was a very sad tragedy. And then, you might know my song Remember Eamon, which I wrote about the bloke I knew on Beaumont Street. Eamon was drinking and he fell down the stairs, cracked his skull open. He was in a coma for a week, and then he died, and he was 43. So it just reminded me that death comes suddenly to some people. You can walk out and get hit by a bus. But there was another man I knew, a homeless man in Hamilton, who got stabbed to death at Beresfield train station 6 months ago. Everyone knew him, and he was stabbed to death. And so he's dead now, death just comes, and it really is random and chance. At the end of the day, I don't believe in any divine plan or destiny, unless you think the universe is a simulation or a brain. I'm open-minded to those ideas, and then you can start to talk about destiny and fate and whether people have purpose or whether any individual life has purpose. But really ultimately, I think people who think that God is protecting them are delusional. God isn't protecting you. There's no God protecting you. There's nothing protecting you. There's just particles flying around in a void. It's completely random, and it happened by fluke, and one day the universe will end and it will be as if nothing ever existed. There's no God protecting you. So I've been dealing with death because there's been a few people, I've been aware of a few deaths, and it's just reminded me how the principle of impermanence, everything will die, and it's completely random. But I'm grateful because I've come to a point in my life where I've reached a very high level of knowledge about how the universe works, and I've said everything I want to say in this video commentary series. I've now done, I think, about 48 videos, and I've covered a lot of subjects. So at least I've left my legacy of I've told you people out there in the world what I think. So I could die tomorrow now, and I wouldn't be that upset because I've said my piece, and you know what I thought now. And I encourage everyone, say your piece and tell the world what you thought, because your life has value and your life is important. Stand up, speak your mind, be counted. That's why it's a fucking democracy. Everyone's supposed to have a voice. So, do your video journal and tell the world your philosophy. And you don't have to be an expert for your philosophy to be valid. Your philosophy is valid because you're an individual and your life is valuable. So, I've said my piece, and I've created so much art over the years and so much controversial content, and I've commentated on war and politics and the issues of the world. So I'm very satisfied with the life I've lived, and I feel like I'm at a climax in my life because I've put this video series out, and everyone can now see for the indefinite future what I thought about the world, so you will know what I thought. So I'm satisfied. So I can say I'm satisfied, and I will die without regrets. And I live every day of my life now in a state where I feel like it might be my last day on earth. And I'm very anxious that I might die tragically in some freak circumstance, getting hit by a bus or something. So I live every day on the edge, and that drives me forward and compels me to do more controversial art. So think about death, and acknowledge death. We don't talk about death in this society. You should acknowledge that you will die, and you should recognise that you should try and do something that's valuable to you and meaningful and powerful while you're alive. I feel like I will die any minute, every second of the day, and it compels me to move forward and create more art and more commentary and more controversial content. So think about what legacy you want to leave behind and leave your mark on the world.